Good morning. Welcome back to another vid. Slurp of tea there, which was a little bit pretentious in hindsight. I'm not sure why I did that. In fact, sometimes I'll watch somebody else do a video, whether it's vinyl related or any vid for that matter, and occasionally they'll have like a slurp of tea or coffee or wine, whatever it is they're drinking. And I'm not going to lie, I do sometimes watch it and I'm like, really? Could you not have waited, until like 10 minutes after the vid or a minute after the vid? Or 30 seconds before the vid. Why have you got to put it at the start? It just looks pretentious. So I'm sorry if you found that pretentious. I didn't mean it that way. I was just thirsty, I guess, really. Anyway, so you just saw a sneak preview there. I'll just say that. So I've got 4 vinyl records and 2 CDs. Now, there's been a few CDs that I've had in the past. In fact, when I started my music pickups, I think they were pretty much exclusively CDs. But ever since then, since kind of switching to vinyl maybe 3 years ago, pretty much exclusively shifting to vinyl. Yeah, I think there's only been 2 or 3 occasions where I've had CDs. But I do still buy them from time to time. I have bought others in the past which I've just not shown on video. I'll always look out for them if there's no vinyl record available, I'll get the CD version. Or sometimes, as is the case on one of these, or with one of these, where the vinyl, it's not very hard to get, it's not very expensive, but I saw this for a couple of dollars, and I thought, you know what, I want to listen to it, let's just get it for a couple of dollars, and then further on down the line, we can pick the record up. So I will continue to do that. And also, really, to be honest, if the vinyl is extremely rare or very expensive, then I won't hesitate in buying the CD version, and then maybe way, way, way down the line, I can pick the record up if I'm that bothered about it. So yeah, you will see CDs, and you will see more, I've had them in the past, DVDs and Blu-rays, all music related, in the future. In fact, maybe my next one at the end of the month you'll see, and if not, certainly the one the following month. Because I bought a few Blu-rays and DVDs. But anyway, we'll start with the records. Like I say, there's 4 altogether, and there's 2 CDs. So the first record I bought is by a band called First Aid Kit. Now, First Aid Kit are a Swedish duo, and for all intents and purposes, it's basically folk music, with a bit kind of dream pop, if you like. At least that's what I kind of gathered when I was listening to it. But yeah, folk-inspired, without question, country-esque. And to be honest, that's not really my kind of thing. But every now and again, I will listen to that kind of thing. It's just not something I'd usually go for. But I think the first track I heard, which coincidentally is the opening track on the album, and it's called My Silver Lining. And when I heard that going back, whenever this album came out, 2014, so it would have been around about then, and when I heard that track, I thought that's really, really good. And I kept a bit of a mental note out to pick the record up eventually. And it just so happened it's taken me quite a while to get it. But I found it for pretty cheap. I think it was around about $15. And I picked it up, and it's good. And some of my favourite tracks on the album, obviously, as I say, My Silver Lining, the opening track, Master Pretender, and Stay Gold. And I'm not just reading off the track list there, because those are coincidentally the first 3 on the album. But those 3 are really good and impressive. So if you like your folk music, essentially, with a bit of country and a slight bit of kind of, as I say, dream pop, very mild elements of rocks, and I hesitate to say that, then this may be your thing. As ever, check out the links below, and you may see a track you like, discover a band you like, and who knows, you may become a big fan in the future. So that's that, First Aid Kit. And I think that's their 3rd album as well. So I'll have to go back and check out their other 2. And I don't think they've released one since. So maybe the fact that came out in 2014, and obviously we're in 2017, maybe another one's going to be impending anytime soon. We'll soon see. Now, a band which definitely are not going to, well, never say never, might have just seen it there, a band who are definitely or probably unlikely to release an album anytime soon are this band. It's a band called XTC. Now, I believe this is the deluxe edition. It doesn't say it on there. The album is called English Settlement. Jesus, sorry, I nearly dropped it there. If I appeared to jump, it's because this nearly kind of fell out. But now, what I'm not going to do in this vid is show you the contents, but what I'm thinking of doing, not just for this particular box set, but for subsequent box sets in the future, is to make a standalone separate vid. And, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it may be, and show you what's inside and make you decide ultimately whether you think it's worth the money. And then, especially if you're interested in it. And the reason why I probably, going forward, like the idea of doing these standalone vids for one-offs, deluxe editions, limited editions, collector's editions, etc., is because I've always been on the lookout and will continue to be on the lookout for certain box sets. And in fact, it may have been this one. It was certainly, if it wasn't this one, it was another one quite recently. And I wanted, before I shelled out on it, I wanted to know what was in the box. So, and whether it was worth it. You know, what do you get for your money? Is it value for money? What do people think? So I went onto YouTube and I saw a couple of videos, and it was really helpful. And it made me determine the fact that, yeah, I will go ahead and get it. Or in the past has made me think, do you know what? I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to get it. It's too expensive. I'll wait for a price drop. So I think if I do those kind of videos, then for some, albeit a minority, it's very niche, I guess, the audience you're looking for, it may be helpful to some people. So if you're into XTC or you're just curious, then keep an eye out on my channel in the future, and I'll do an unboxing of it. It'll be short, it'll be quick and to the point, but it'll give people an idea as to what you get. But anyway, XTC, basically kind of a new wave band, a post-punk band, a rock band from the late 70s. I think technically they split up around about 2006, but I believe their last studio album was the very late 90s, but I do stand corrected. Now, this is an interesting album, really, because this is their 5th album called English Settlement, as I say. And the interesting thing about this, it came out in 1982. Now, in 1982, the singer in the band, Andy Partridge, and it was early 82, and this album came out in February as well, and it was around about that time, so I'm going to guess, I should know this, but I think he must have been maybe, or the band were promoting the album, and on stage in Paris, France, obviously, in case you didn't know where Paris was, he had a nervous breakdown. And ever since then, you know, up until the band split up, there was just a handful of appearances that the band did, whether it was, you know, television programmes, a few live television shows, the odd thing here and there that they did. But I don't believe they ever went on tour ever again after that episode where he had his mental breakdown, essentially, in 1982. So, in a way, it's kind of quite a haunting album, I imagine, for maybe him personally. But it's an excellent album. Some of the tracks are so good. Things like Senses Working Overtime, Jason and the Argonauts, No Thugs in Our House. I could just basically list the entire album. It's so good. And XTC for me, now, if you're not familiar with XTC, if you hear the track Making Plans for Nigel, you'll probably recognise it. It's one of those which is usually played on like 80s TV programmes, you know, when they're talking about like music from the past or just that era in general. So you'll probably recognise that song. And I recognised it, but it's not until recently. I'm a bit embarrassed to say, but relieved to say as well, because I've now really got into them. But it's not until recently, or relatively recently, that I've started listening to them. So this has been a fantastic introduction, and I can see why they're an amazing band. But even though they're a big band, still very, very underrated. And I think maybe part of the reason as well that they went under the radar for a lot of people is because of Andy Partridge's nervous or mental breakdown that he had. And with that, obviously, they kind of they shunned the press. They weren't really performing live. They were still releasing studio albums, but when you're not promoting it with world tours, then, you know, you do take a bit of a back seat. But it's not like they disappeared from the face of the earth. They still turned up from time to time, doing interviews and the odd performance. But in terms of live performances and gigs and tours, I should say, then, I believe that was the last one they ever had, which is a shame. Anyway, so, next album. Now, I used to have this. In fact, I'm sure I've still got it. But I remember specifically buying it, as I remember specifically buying, I think, the next 3 after this one. 1996, the height really of Britpop. You know, Britpop as you think of it, when you think of like Country House and, you know, anything by Oasis, quite frankly, Morning Glory, Wonderwall, all that kind of stuff. You know, that kind of Britpop was really 95, 96, and maybe a tiny bit of 97. But by 97, it had started to fade away. You could still call it Britpop, but it was very kind of lo-fi as well. It was changing direction. You know, the Verve, urban hymns, all that kind of stuff. Technically still Britpop, but really had started to move away. So that Britpop label, pretty much, I'd say, is 94, 95, 96, and that's pretty much it. And this was released in 1996, really at the height of Britpop. Now, the original record was on the Polydor label. This is a reissue, and it's on Demon Records. That band is called Cast, and the album is called All Change. And I loved this album when it came out, and it's still so fresh today. Now, the good thing about Cast, I went on a Cast Fest the other day on YouTube, and I was liking and watching loads of videos, interviews with John Power, and he's a really nice guy. I like how he comes across. Although he sounds and looks When not so much looks, I'll take that back. He sounds exactly like Lily Savage, if anyone knows Lily Savage. But maybe that's just a Liverpool thing. Maybe that's what it is. It doesn't look like Lily Savage. I definitely take that back. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Just saying. But yeah, John Power, really good artist, a really good songwriter. Hidden under the radar, really. Not a lot of people sort of talk about him when it comes to some of the best. Now, I'm not saying he's up there with some of the greatest, but I do think he's quite underrated. So this album's got some classics. We're looking at Alright, Promised Land, Sandstorm, what else? Fine Time, Walk Away. A really, really strong record. And Cast have got a new album out, which I think came out last month. Now, I was going to pre-order it. In fact, I thought I had. I looked at it a couple of weeks back, and it transpired I didn't. But on those kind of like pledge websites, where you can get like a signed copy or whatever else, other incentives to the more you pay, the more you kind of get. But I didn't actually buy it, and the album is called Kicking Up the Dust. But I will get that. I've not seen any reviews for it at all, but it's Cast, and I'm really interested to see what they sound like, the modern version of Cast. I believe it's the same members. Maybe one of them may have left, I'm not sure, but other than that, it's the original lot. If not, maybe they're all still there, the original ones. Now, speaking of the Britpop era, but pushed on a bit, a Britpop band, as I just mentioned, it's Oasis. Now, this album gets a lot of flack, but I think it's brilliant. I really, really like it. It's Oasis, like I say, and it's called Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, and it came out in 2000. Now, the Standing on the Shoulder of Giants tour, I went to see Oasis on this tour. I went to see them at Wembley. They played 2 nights it was June or July, I can't remember. We went to the second night. And the second night, if anyone knows their stuff, was where Liam was completely off his head. He was drunk, maybe taking a few pills or whatever, that night, or that morning, I should say, or that weekend, who knows. But when we were there, we couldn't really tell, when you're caught in the atmosphere, the adrenaline's running, and I couldn't really tell that his voice was so bad. It was only when I went back and watched it the following night, because it was live on Sky. So we recorded it, me and my friends, and who I went with to the gig, and we were like, bloody hell, that is pretty bad. But it's become like quite an infamous gig. There's a lot of funny things that happened that night, and it's one where even though the performance from Liam was bad for most of the night, it's one that a lot of fans claim they went to. It's kind of turned into an infamous kind of gig. That kind of thing where like people who didn't go say they did. But I genuinely did. I didn't go to the first night where it was just spot on by all accounts. But the second night was an experience. And there's so many anecdotes I can share about that. That whole evening of we missed our train back, and we had to spend the night in Victoria Station, but then we were kicked out about 3 o'clock in the morning because the woman or security guard or whatever thought we were tramps. What an insult. But I'll maybe share that story because there's a lot of weird stuff that happened that night. I'll save that for another day. But yeah, this album gets a lot of flack, a lot of criticism, but for me it's one of their best. I genuinely feel it's so underrated. Again, I'm just going to reel out all the tracks basically. But things like, Go Let It Out was a staple kind of single from the time. Where Did It All Go Wrong is an amazing track. I love some of the lyrics. What's one of the lyrics which I really like is, do you keep the receipts for the friends that you buy? Which is really poignant. I like that. It's not that's in relation to anything which is going on in my life or anything, but I think we can all think of examples where, we've got friends, or we think we've got friends, but do we really want them as friends? Can we really trust them? Do they like us? Do we really like them? So do you keep the receipts for the friends that you buy? I always remember liking that. Even when I heard it, I thought, that's clever. I like that one. Roll It Over, I think, is a really good, underrated track. Gas Panic, I've always been a big fan of that one. I Can See a Liar. Little James was Liam's song. It's a little bit weak for that matter. But it's not too bad. It's not too bad overall. But yeah, Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, I feel personally a very, very underrated album. Now, 2 CDs, and they're both very, very, very loosely related in the sense I think that the singer ended up having a bit of a relationship with the wife of this guy who died before. Oh, what complicated. So we'll start with the band. Now, this band, I'll just show it actually. It's a CD. It's Nirvana, Nevermind, an absolute classic. Who doesn't like that? Seriously. So it folds out. You get a couple of CDs in there. So yeah, CD1, CD2, there's a load of extra tracks, a load of B-sides that I remember listening to back in sort of 93 time, 94 time. Things like Even in His Youth, Being a Son, School, Drain You, live performances of I think those latter ones, D7. Even in His Youth just really takes me back to around about 93, 94. Just before I'm going to mention it again, that whole Britpop thing, just before I got into that in a big way, I was still kind of lingering around the grunge scene, not massively. I think by 94 it was probably just Nirvana that I was listening to from that kind of genre, because I'd say around about 92, 93 I started to get into bands like Suede and Blur, The Wonder Stuff, Kingmaker, Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine. I've mentioned all these bands before, Ride, early Verve stuff, but I was still listening to Nirvana because they were a brilliant band. So yeah, I remember buying as well. I'm sure I've told this little anecdote, but I'll share it again. It must have been about 1992, and I went into Our Price Records in Bournemouth, I think, Poole or Bournemouth, whichever one it was. And I was 13 or 14 at the time, and I remember going up to the counter and handing over Nevermind, and I could barely reach the counter, and the guy kind of looked down at me. I guess I was a late grower. What am I, about 5'9", 5'10", something like that. But back then, when I was 14, I was pretty small. And I remember the guy just looking at me thinking, you're too young to be buying this. And at the time I was wearing like a black and yellow flannel checked shirt, like really kind of grunge look. But yeah, I was really into Nirvana. So I remember buying that, and that was on cassette, as it would be, you'd expect in 91, 92. So an absolutely fantastic album. Basically every track is fantastic, every single track. From the opening track, Smells Like Teen Spirit, to the last track, Something in the Way, which is the complete polar opposite end of the spectrum. But some of my personal favourites, I love In Bloom, Come As You Are. Lithium was probably my favourite as a kid. Absolutely loved that. Drain You, Lounge Act, Stay Away, On a Plane. It's just an outstanding album. Honestly, if you don't like Nirvana, or maybe shock horror, you've never really listened to them, then you've got to listen to Nevermind. You've got to buy it. Without question, it's one of the best albums ever made. I mean, just without question, there's no debate. And I will get the vinyl eventually. But the CD I was happy to get because it's the 20th anniversary. That's the thing as well. I don't know if it says it on there. I think it says it on the back somewhere. Yeah, you can just about see it there with a little kind of smiley face if it wants to pick it up. Nirvana 20th edition, basically, I think it says. Just Nirvana 20, Nevermind. So, 20 years. And that was then. That was 2011. So it's over a quarter of a century old, Nevermind. Over a quarter of a century. Jeez. Unbelievable. And then the last CD that I bought is by a band who I've not listened to for a long, long time, but I used to really enjoy them back in the early to mid-90s. And then ever since then, I've kind of dipped in and out, but I've not really listened to them now for probably 6 or 7 years. Don't even think I've heard a track, which is ridiculous, up until picking up this record. CD, sorry. And it's the Lemonheads, and the album is called Come On Feel. Or is it Come On Feel the Lemonheads? I could never work it out as a kid. What do you call it? Is it Lemonheads or is it Come On Feel the Lemonheads? Weird. So, this came out in 1993. Some fantastic tracks. The Great Big No, Into Your Arms. These are some of the first songs that I learned to play on the guitar, believe it or not. Because even though I technically picked up the guitar when I was like 7 or 8, or maybe even younger than that, it wasn't until around about 92, 93 where I really started to learn chords. And I specifically remember playing some of these songs because they're so simple to play. Like I say, Into Your Arms is very simple. Down About It, I remember trying to play that one. Favourite T, Being Around was really easy. I think it was like a G and a C chord, maybe a D. Very, very simple, basic stuff. But that's a great track. Big Gay Heart, Paid to Smile, Style, Rick James's Style as well. You Can Take It With You, some really good tracks. And the link, in case you were wondering before, when I was talking about the husband and wife and all this kind of stuff, is Evan Dando went out with, I believe, Courtney Love, which of course is the ex-wife of Kurt Cobain. So there's the link. That's the link that I was talking about. And I've always liked Evan Dando. I've been a big fan of him. I always thought he looked cool, good-looking guy. As an artist, I thought when he had his long hair and stuff, he not shaved his hair, got it cut really short. But even that looked kind of cool. And oddly enough, that kind of inspired me, because my hair was pretty long. Not crazily long, but longer than what you'd want to see. Probably shoulder length. Not too dissimilar, I guess, to that. In around about 94 time. And I got mine cut short around about the same time he did. But it wasn't because he did. It was just fashionable to get it cut short at the time, so I did. It just coincidentally. So I used to really like Evan Dando. Great solo artist. I say great, maybe that's a bit too generous. But yeah, not seen what he's been doing for a few years, actually, so I may have to check that out. So there we go. We've got the 2 CDs, and then we've got the 4 records. And going forward, like I say, what I'm going to do, no promises as to when, but I'm going to do maybe some unboxings of the records, the deluxe editions, limited editions, all that kind of stuff. Because I just think it'll be interesting if maybe you're looking for something in particular and it will maybe entice you to buying it or not. Maybe you may think, do you know what, you don't get a lot of value for money for that. I'm going to hold off. So, until my next vid, whenever that is, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.